The billing office smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I stood at the counter, gripping the edge so hard my knuckles turned white. Behind me, my mother-in-law's voice cut through the murmurs of waiting families, like a knife through butter. If she truly loved my son, she wouldn't be asking about costs right now, she announced to the nurse. My husband, Marcus, stood beside her, staring at his shoes. The bill sat between us on the counter, $847,000 for the emergency surgery that had just saved our 6-year-old daughter Lily's life. My hands shook as I looked at the number again. Then at Marcus, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He didn't move. The cashier cleared her throat, her eyes tired but sympathetic. "Ma'am, I need to know," she said quietly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Who will be paying for this today?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Marcus again. His mother stepped closer to him, her hand protective on his shoulder. I turned fully toward Marcus, my voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus?" He finally looked up, but not at me, at his mother. She gave him the smallest shake of her head. My stomach dropped. "We need to discuss this as a family first," he mumbled, still not meeting my eyes. The people behind us in line shifted uncomfortably. I felt my face burning with humiliation. "Our daughter just had emergency brain surgery," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's nothing to discuss. She needs follow-up care. They need payment to continue treatment." His mother huffed loudly. "Love isn't about throwing money around, dear. It's about faith and patience." I stared at her, then at my husband, waiting for him to defend me, to defend our daughter. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The cashier's computer beeped urgently. "I'm sorry," she said, "but without payment confirmation, we'll have to delay the follow-up procedures scheduled for tomorrow morning." My daughter had collapsed at school 3 days ago. One moment she was laughing at lunch, the next she was unconscious on the cafeteria floor. The seizure had been sudden and violent. By the time the ambulance arrived, she'd stopped breathing twice. At the hospital, they'd found the tumor, a mass pressing against her brainstem, growing fast, strangling the parts of her that controlled everything vital. The surgeon had been blunt. "Operate now, or lose her by morning." I'd signed the consent forms with shaking hands while Marcus paced the hallway, his mother whispering frantically in his ear. The surgery had taken 11 hours. 11 hours of pacing, praying, bargaining with a God I wasn't sure was listening. When the surgeon emerged, exhausted but smiling, saying Lily would live, I'd collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing with relief. That had been 16 hours ago. Now we stood in this office, and the relief was— I swallowed my pride, tasting bile. "Marcus, please," I whispered, stepping closer to him, away from the crowd. Can we figure this out? For Lily?" He jerked his arm away from my touch like I'd burned him. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Claire," he snapped, his voice sharp and unfamiliar. "You always think everything can be solved by throwing cash at it." I stepped back, stunned. Those weren't his words. They were hers. His mother smiled, that thin, satisfied smile I'd learned to hate over 7 years of marriage. "See? My son understands what real love looks like. It's not about material things." She turned to the growing audience of waiting families. "It's about sacrifice. About enduring hardship together." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Our daughter is upstairs recovering from brain surgery," I said slowly, "and you're lecturing me about materialism." She stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This will teach you humility, dear. Sometimes God uses trials to break our pride." I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. Without a word, I turned and walked into the hallway, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall in front of them. My phone felt like lead in my trembling hands. I scrolled through my contacts, past all the recent calls: Marcus's mother, the school, the hospital. I stopped at a name I hadn't touched in 3 years. My finger hovered over it. I'd promised myself I'd never use this connection, never ask for this kind of help. It felt like admitting defeat, like proving I couldn't stand on my own. But Lily's face flashed through my mind pale against the hospital pillows, tubes and wires connecting her small body to machines that beeped her heartbeat into the sterile air. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Claire? The voice was warm, concerned, instantly alert. I need help, I whispered, my voice cracking. Send me the bill, my brother replied immediately. All of it. I'll handle it right now. When I walked back into the waiting area, Marcus and his mother had moved to the corner, surrounded by his aunt and uncle who must have just arrived. His mother's voice carried across the room, full of righteous conviction. A real woman doesn't solve problems by spending money. She endures. She sacrifices. She trusts her husband to provide in his own time, in his own way. The aunt nodded solemnly. The uncle muttered something about modern women and entitlement. I stood frozen, watching this performance, this public shaming disguised as spiritual guidance. When I was young, his mother continued, I waited tables while pregnant, walked 3 miles to work in the snow, never complained. That's what love looks like. Not this. This demanding and manipulating. She gestured vaguely in my direction without looking at me. Several people in the waiting room were watching now, some nodding along, others looking uncomfortable. My cheeks burned. Marcus stood silent, letting his mother speak for him, for us, for our dying daughter's worth. An administrator in navy scrubs appeared at the desk, scanning a tablet. The administrator looked up, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. Mrs. Bennett? I stepped forward, my heart pounding. The payment for Lily Bennett's account has been received in full. All procedures are approved to continue as scheduled. The room went completely silent. Marcus's mother's mouth fell open mid-sentence. Marcus's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with confusion, and something that looked like suspicion. The administrator smiled professionally. The follow-up surgery tomorrow morning is confirmed. The neurology team will brief you at 6 a.m. My knees felt weak with relief, but I kept my face neutral. Behind me, I heard his mother's sharp intake of breath, followed by furious whispering. How? Marcus asked, his voice loud in the quiet room. How did you? I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked at him, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time what I'd been refusing to see for years. The administrator glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. His mother pushed past Marcus, her face red. Who paid that bill? Marcus moved closer to me, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Claire, did you borrow money? From who? We agreed we'd never take on debt like that. I almost laughed at the absurdity. We'd agreed? When had we agreed on anything? Just tell me you didn't do something stupid, he pressed, his hand gripping my elbow tightly. I pulled away. Stupid like letting our daughter die to preserve your pride. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. His mother was interrogating the administrator now, demanding to see payment records, insisting there must be some mistake. The administrator remained professionally calm, but I could see her patience thinning. The payment was legitimate and verified, she said firmly. That's all I can tell you, without the payer's consent. His mother whirled back to me. This is completely inappropriate. Marcus's father and I were handling this situation. We were going to set up a reasonable payment plan, teach you both fiscal responsibility. The payer will be arriving shortly, the administrator interrupted, checking her tablet. He requested to speak with the family in person. 20 minutes later, my brother walked through the hospital entrance like he owned the building, which, I suddenly remembered, he partially did. Thomas had invested in this hospital's new wing 2 years ago. His presence commanded attention without effort. He wore an expensive suit but had loosened his tie, his face showing the strain of having rushed here from whatever meeting I'd pulled him out of. Marcus froze when he saw him. His mother's face went through several complicated expressions before settling on confused anger. Thomas walked straight to me, ignoring everyone else. "How's Lily?" he asked quietly, his hand on my shoulder. "She's stable. The surgery went well." Relief flooded his face. Then he turned to the administrator. "I'm Thomas Price. I authorized the payment. Is everything processed correctly?" She nodded, professional warmth replacing her earlier wariness. "Yes, Mr. Price. Thank you. The family can now focus on recovery instead of finances." Thomas smiled briefly, then his eyes moved to Marcus and his mother, his expression cooling considerably. "We need to talk," he said simply. The administrator handed Thomas a printed receipt before excusing herself tactfully. He held it out toward Marcus's mother, who snatched it from his hands. I watched her eyes scan the paper once, then again more slowly. The color drained from her face. $847,000, she read aloud, her voice faint. "Paid in full by Thomas Price." She looked up at me, then at Thomas, her mind visibly trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she thought she knew about the world. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You're a teacher. You can't possibly." "I'm not a teacher," I said quietly. "I was a teacher before I married Marcus." Thomas's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting me speak. "Thomas is my brother. My younger brother who I helped raise after our parents died, who I put through college and business school with the money from our inheritance." Marcus stared at me like I was a stranger. "You never told me you had a brother." The words hung there, heavy with accusation and confusion. I looked at him steadily. "You never asked about my family. Your mother said it didn't matter, that we were starting fresh." The waiting room had mostly cleared out, giving us a terrible privacy for this unraveling. Thomas stepped closer, his voice hard. "Let me fill in what Claire's too kind to say. When our parents died, Claire was 19. I was 15. She inherited everything, the house, the life insurance, the investments. Almost $2 million. Marcus's uncle whistled low. His mother clutched the receipt tighter. "She could have gone to any college she wanted," Thomas continued. "Instead, she stayed local, worked part-time, managed the money carefully. She paid for my private school, my college, my MBA. She set up trusts. She invested wisely." He looked at Marcus with barely concealed contempt. "By the time I graduated, that inheritance had grown to over $5 million. When Claire married you, I wanted to give her half. She refused. Said she wanted to build a life with you on your own merit." I closed my eyes, remembering that argument. How naive I'd been, thinking love and hard work would be enough. "She's been living on your teacher's salary?" his mother asked faintly. "By choice," Thomas answered. "Supporting your household on $38,000 a year while I managed her portfolio, which is now worth substantially more." I opened my eyes and looked directly at Marcus's mother, borrowing her own words from 30 minutes ago. "Love isn't about money, remember." My voice was calm, almost gentle, but everyone in that hallway heard the steel underneath. "You said that. You said if I truly loved Marcus, I wouldn't care about costs. That real love is about faith and patience and endurance." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "So I loved him," I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I loved him enough to pretend I had nothing so he could feel like the provider. I loved him enough to shop at thrift stores and clip coupons while my investment accounts grew. I loved him enough to let you lecture me about humility and sacrifice while I quietly paid off the car you gave him for his birthday, the one you couldn't actually afford." Her face went from white to red. You paid for that car. The down payment, I corrected. And most of the monthly payments funneled through. Thomas, so you'd never know your son needed help from his wife. Marcus looked like I'd slapped him, tears starting to form in his eyes. What did you say? My voice was quiet, but everyone heard it in the terrible silence. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I said money doesn't grow on trees. You did, I agreed. And what did you do when your mother lectured me about humility? When she said this trial would break my pride? He said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the moment he understood what was happening. I asked you one thing, Marcus. Not for money, not for wealth. I asked you to stand beside me, to defend our daughter, to be my husband. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. You chose, I said simply. I took a deep breath, feeling something settle into place inside me. Something that felt like clarity, like stepping out of fog into harsh sunlight. I'll handle Lily's care, I said to the room at large, but really to Marcus and his mother. All of it. The surgery tomorrow, the recovery, the ongoing treatment. Whatever she needs. His mother started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not asking for input. I'm not asking for approval. I'm informing you of what's going to happen. I looked at Marcus. You and I need to have a longer conversation, but not here. Not now. Right now, our daughter needs her mother, and I need to be someone she can count on. Thomas nodded approvingly beside me. His mother stood up abruptly, her voice regaining some of its earlier authority. Now wait just a minute. You can't just make unilateral decisions about medical care. Marcus is her father. He has rights. I laughed then, a short, bitter sound. Rights? He has rights. Where were those rights when the bill needed paying? When the decisions needed making? I turned back to Marcus. I'm going upstairs to sit with our daughter. You're welcome to join me, but your mother isn't. Not until she apologizes. His mother's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. Apologize? For what? For trying to teach you proper values? For trying to help my son? No, I interrupted. Not for that. For what you said tomorrow. Her face went confused. Tomorrow? You'll understand tomorrow, I said simply. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through my banking app to a transfer I'd scheduled months ago. That car payment you've been making. The one you think comes from Marcus's direct deposit. She paled. As of midnight tonight, it stops. The payment plan I set up for your credit card debt? Also done. The grocery delivery service I've been paying for anonymously. Cancelled. Thomas raised his eyebrows, even he hadn't known about all of this. Marcus's aunt gasped. You can't just, I can, I said calmly. And I am. I've been subsidizing this family's lifestyle for years, quietly, without acknowledgement or thanks, because I thought that's what love looked like. Sacrifice without recognition. I looked at Marcus's mother directly. I picked up my bag from the chair where I'd dropped it hours ago, back when I'd still been a different person, back when I'd still believed in the fairy tale I'd been telling myself. I'm going upstairs to be with Lily, I said. Marcus, you can come if you want. But just you. Not your mother. Not your aunt. Not anyone who thinks love is about suffering silently, while others benefit. I started walking toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard his mother's voice rise in panic. Marcus, you can't let her do this. Tell her she's being unreasonable. I pressed the elevator button, not turning around. Tell her about the mortgage. Tell her we need. Mom. Marcus's voice cut through, sharp and broken. Stop. Just stop. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and finally turned around. Marcus stood alone in the middle of the hallway, his mother reaching for him, his family clustering around him, everyone talking at once. But he was looking at me, only at me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely carrying across the space between us. I nodded once. I know, I said gently. But sorry doesn't pay hospital bills. And it doesn't erase 45 minutes of silence when I needed you most. The doors slid closed. 3 months later, I sat in the lawyer's office, signing the final papers. Lily was recovering beautifully. The surgery had been successful, and the follow-up treatments were progressing better than anyone had hoped. She asked about her father sometimes. I told her the truth, age-appropriately. Daddy and Mommy were taking some time apart to figure things out. Marcus had moved back in with his mother 2 weeks after the hospital incident. He'd called, texted, begged to talk. I'd agreed to one conversation, in a neutral location, without his family present. He'd cried, apologized, sworn he'd change. But when I'd asked him point-blank if he'd told his mother she was wrong, if he'd defended me in the days after, his silence had told me everything I needed to know. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, slid the last document across the table. Your brother's accountant did excellent work protecting your assets. Marcus won't get anything beyond what you've agreed to give him. I nodded, signing my name with a hand that didn't shake. Thomas had wanted me to give Marcus nothing. I'd insisted on a small settlement, enough to help him get on his feet, not enough to support his mother's lifestyle. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, addressed in his mother's careful handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it. But Lily was at a play date, and I had time. And something made me curious about what she could possibly have to say after 3 months of silence. The letter was 3 pages long, single-spaced. It started with Dear Claire and ended with Your mother-in-law who loves you. In between was a masterclass in passive-aggressive manipulation disguised as repentance. She was sorry if I had felt hurt. She hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her unintentional mistakes. She wanted me to know that Marcus was struggling, that the family was going through hard times, that surely I didn't mean to punish everyone for a simple misunderstanding. She reminded me of biblical principles of forgiveness. She suggested family therapy. She mentioned casually that they'd had to sell the house I'd been secretly paying for. I read it twice, looking for any moment of genuine understanding, any acknowledgement that what she'd done was cruel and calculated. I didn't find it. I sat down at my desk and drafted a response. I kept the response short. Dear Mrs. Bennet, thank you for your letter. I appreciate you taking the time to write. However, I need to clarify something important. What happened at the hospital wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation. You showed me exactly what you thought of me, of my daughter, and of love itself. You taught me that in your eyes, love is about control, about hierarchy, about keeping people in their place. I paused, remembering her face when she'd realized I had money, how quickly her contempt had shifted to grasping need. You were right about one thing. Love isn't about money. But money reveals what love actually looks like. Real love protects. Real love stands up, especially in public, especially when it's hard. Real love doesn't let someone you care about be humiliated while you stand silent. I thought about Marcus, still unable to fully stand against his mother even now. You asked about forgiveness. I forgive you for being who you are. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you. Forgiveness doesn't mean I'll ever let you close enough to hurt me or my daughter again. Signed it simply Claire and mailed it before I could second guess myself. A year later, I stood in the hospital parking lot, a different hospital this time, for Lily's final follow-up scan. The neurologist had been optimistic, using words like full recovery and no signs of recurrence. Thomas stood beside me, having taken the morning off to be there, just like he'd been there for every major appointment. "How are you doing?" he asked as we walked to my car. "Really doing?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm good," I said, surprised to find it was true. Better than good, actually. "Lily's healthy. I'm working again teaching at the university now, because I want to, not because I have to. I have friends, a life, peace." He smiled. "No regrets? About Marcus?" I thought about it. I regret that it took a crisis to see clearly. I regret that Lily had to go through all of that to lose her father. But I don't regret leaving. I don't regret protecting myself and her. We reached my car, and I unlocked it but didn't get in yet. His mother sent another letter last week, I mentioned, asking if Lily could visit for Christmas. Thomas's expression darkened. "And?" I told her no. Maybe when Lily's older and can make that choice herself, but not now. I leaned against the car, feeling the sun on my face. I'm not angry anymore. That's the weird part. I just don't care. She has no power over me. Last week, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. It was inevitable in a town this size, but still jarring to see him pushing a cart past the produce section where we used to shop together. He looked older, tired. We made awkward small talk whether work. Nothing meaningful. Then, as I was about to leave, he stopped me. "I told her she was wrong," he said quietly. "My mother. I finally told her everything she did was wrong. That she destroyed my marriage." I waited, not helping him, not making it easier. "I know it's too late," he continued. "I know I was too late that day at the hospital, and I've been too late every day since. But I wanted you to know." I looked at this man I'd once loved enough to hide my whole self for, and I felt nothing but a distant, gentle sadness for what we'd both lost. "My mom used to tell me love isn't about money," I said softly, echoing the words that started everything. She was right. But she forgot to mention that money reveals everything. It reveals who stands beside you when things are hard, who protects you when you're vulnerable, who values you when you have nothing to offer. I smiled slightly, without bitterness. "Thank you for showing me what you valued, Marcus. It freed me to find what I'm worth." I walked away without looking back, whole and healed and finally free.